education campaign under the threat. So I would like to give the floor and invite our speakers to the podium here. And she would like to address the Ukrainian society and the people's deputies over here on Radio Ukraine. We are members of the public platform Reanimation package reform. We are very much concerned by the positions of some of the deputies aimed at further ruination of the education sector. The external independent assessment, which was one of the attainments of the Ukrainian educational sphere over the last 20 years, created the necessary preconditions to eliminate corruption and also provided the possibility of the free access to any young person. But on March 15, 2015, a group of the people's deputies, Spivkovsky, Hrynevych, and some others, registered another draft law, 3335, and the changes have been introduced into the law of Ukraine on the higher education for equal rights to get that education, which is aimed at the direct interference into the external independent evaluation, which is already started. And this draft law is aimed at renovating the hard-to-understand schemes. Actually, it leaves behind a lot of questions and creates new problems. Speaking about the admission processes, touch upon a big number of those who would like to enter the universities or colleges. They forget to say that those candidates to students have not big chances to be admitted. And this actually will lead to aggravation of the situation with the higher education and in non-efficient spending of the money. Yeah, again, we could very quickly develop or adapt the methods for the points, scale, whatever, if there were money allocated from the state budget. But even in this case, it would be very difficult to persuade the public at large that this rate calculation was really correctly done, and this ensures the equal conditions for entering the higher schools to everybody. And again, there is an idea of the authors of this draft law about the initial competence. And they said that this test for the initial competence is already ready to be used. But if we are talking about the junior bachelor or the bachelor level, we have to take care of this specific issue. What would be the status of this level? According to the law on higher education in Ukraine, the financing of the independent external assessment has to be done based on the budgetary money, but the allocation of that money has been drastically decreased, and maybe a couple of years from now we can raise the issue about the carrying out this test for the purposes of the external independent testing. In Article 2, they propose 2 months term after this law takes force. We cannot do that without introducing changes or modifications to the law on higher education. In particular, it also is true about some of the articles regarding the term of publishing the conditions of admission to the higher school to be approved by the State Committee in the sphere of science and technology. We also have to introduce changes in the Article 142 regarding the list of those who are going to take part in this external independent evaluation. So, we members of the public platform RPR we state and we declare that this draft law will not be able to resolve the existing problems. It can be implemented and really badly requires to introduce some changes into the law on the higher education in Ukraine. So we address the deputies, the public at large, especially those who are the authors of this draft law, just to call back this draft law, and also to the deputies of Verkhovna Rada not to adopt this draft law, this law. Thank you.
As to this draft law, Katerina Iryna, senior fellow of National Academy of Sciences and expert of RPR. I'd like to dwell on some aspects of our system of education, and the main issue of education and science is not the absence of money and not the absence of staff, but it's the absence of belief into this system, absence of faith to this system of education. There's no faith into levels, ranks, diplomas, and until recently, we even on Hrynevych there was an ad when there was advertising diplomas, thesis, etc. And you didn't see the advertisement of the assessment. There is somewhere, but the system of assessment, that the only island which is trusted by the society, and that is confirmed by different public opinion polls. And the draft law 23/35 is directed to destroy the system of trust. There is one explanation that this draft law has to provide equal opportunities, even access to education, but even the Constitution says that is provided on the basis of a competitive selection. And this draft law destroys competitive selection. I will not touch statistics laws, but statistically we can prove that there is no way to make a correct recounting of all certificates into new certificates and the scoring system. Any system of assessment, I would like to remind such a fact, is done only for concrete goals, with concrete limitations. And the system of external independent assessment does not evaluate absolute knowledge. And that's a place of a concrete student from concrete groups in the rating. That place, which is taken by that pupil a year ago, has nothing to do with the rating of this year. And in fact, this draft law destroys the right of these of students for equal access. Part of arguments are just populistic of the authors. They put some effort to support weak students, and they told that they cannot add math and they cannot pass that through assessment. And why it should be an argument? Why should they be taken to universities? Of course, there are serious problems in education. That's one of the amortization of unemployment. That's one of the functions of education, and also weak. They say that these kids will go to the streets and they will not, and we have to deal with them. Amortization of unemployment we cannot solve through destroyment of trust to quality of education and through destroyment of trust to education in general. And there are lots of problems in education, but we should solve them using correct approaches. Thank you. Good afternoon, dear colleagues. I am thankful to RTR that invited me as the head of the Committee on Education and Science to the press conference. I, first of all, wanted to draw your attention of you journalists that those changes in assessment for 2015, those changes focused at improvement of objectivity of assessment during that assessment. because the changes that were brought by previous people in the ministry, they brought to reduce an objectivity of assessment. And when we compare certificates of different certificates for different years and in Ukraine until now, we don't have this method of creation of comparable tests for every year. We introduced injustice when the authors of the law, draft law, say they speak about justice. In fact, their justice, they replace an unjust assessment because we cannot compare results of assessment of certificates of assessment of different years for different years. There is one more feature which is related to this test of this year. It has some innovations. First of all, the threshold passed or not passed. That's quite a new method of defining of that threshold, after which they receive 100 points and they can compete for university. It means that a proposal as to publicizing some tables, comparative results of external assessment for different years is impossible to be realized, because at that time there was a completely different approach to decide on this threshold points. All this discussion pushes us to decide to solve new strategic issues in the development of this external assessment, and we'll have to and we'll be able to do that since the next year, when we introduced this new barrier, passed not passed. The next test will be passed or not passed, and we can project a test for the next years, use an anchor task and so those methods so that are necessary for us to have the same test to the complication. Now it's impossible to do because the test will not build in that way. Authors of the draft law probably suggesting such a comparative tables that they have not considered specifics and technologies of preparing tests. One more third position of this draft law, which misleads people, and we should think about this. Authors suggest to all who graduated from a high school a year or more ago to pass a test of general competences, Tizinka test, which will check language competence and math competence. Taken as an example for SAT, that is an American test, and taken as an example Swedish test, SAT, and I would like to explain principal difference between those tests which we take as an example and this Ukrainian test, Ukrainian situation. American test was introduced in 1920s for military men. And America doesn't have a general program. Every state has its own program. They had to find something in common just to test. The Americas moves to subject test, and more of them they have. In Sweden, in 1977, they introduced this Swedish SAT, and it was introduced for the country of students who calculated 25 plus 4, what does mean people who were older than 25 and who graduated not less than 4 years ago. We would like to introduce a new test for the majority of students and during previous years, graduates from schools. Teachers don't know about that test, people don't know about that test, and for every test you have to prepare. I can imagine there will be offices set up through Ukraine. We passed the test with the best marks. So we need to be very careful as the introduction of a new test. And we need to understand for which categories we introduced that. I will compare the results of the test with the subject test of graduates of this year. So we don't have answers for those questions. That's why, no doubt, we need to pay attention to the strategy of development of this external independent assessment. We need to improve it. We need to improve its objectivity, but this draft law, unfortunately, doesn't solve that problem. I was not able, I felt, and colleagues who invited to the Committee on Science and Education, I felt to convince all members of the committee that the draft law should be sent for additional work. I voted against this draft law, and I voted to send it for further work. Unfortunately, 3 against 2. They decided to take this draft law as basic. I hope there will be enough of wisdom and there will be enough understanding of the situation. For now, when since April 24, there was the first test for us and not to destabilize the campaign to enter universities, because people will not know where to go to, whether to pass a test or not to pass, and that can introduce chaos and it will not improve conditions for external assessment, but it will do quite the opposite.
Good afternoon, esteemed colleagues. My name is Svitlana Blahodetelyeva-Vovk. I represent here the Reanimation package of reforms. I would like to call a spade a spade. So, those who developed or drafted the draft law 23 to 35, and also those deputies from the companies who supported that draft law, are in fact representatives of the rector lobby. So they protect the incomes, the profits, and the assets of the rector's clientele and their assistants, which formed over the years of independence in Ukraine. Some of the rectors never changed or never were displaced by somebody else for 20 and more years. So what they did with their own environment, we only can raise those questions. Those who propose this law, they protect directly the interests of the rectors in their clientele. On the part of the RPR, we would like to call upon the people's deputies of our committee on the issues of science and technology with a proposal to form the anti-crisis program of development of the education and science, which today is absolutely urgent and topical. Number 2, we would like to initiate the development of the draft law on the renovation of the system of management of education and science. Thank you very much for your attention. Good afternoon. Volodymyr Buhrov, rector of the Kyiv National Shevchenko University. The draft law, which has been submitted for consideration, became the reason for the another thorough analysis of the Commission Admission Committee for entry to our university. And our university had the largest over the years of independent Ukraine number of the applications to let's say to take the courses to get the bachelor degree based on the independent external evaluation. Out of 48,000 applications, we had 1,700 applications. I stress applications from those people who did not finish the high school, not this year, not the previous year, but before. So the almost 1,500 applications came from those, let's say, candidate students who already study, and the rest only from those who did not realize the right to higher education. But speaking about those natural person number, only 60, and that number is only 60. So you know that each year candidate student can apply to enter only one higher school. So again, we are talking about this draft law and the idea behind that, according to the authors, to give the right to those people who didn't realize their right. There is no sense in that, because under the available conditions in Ukraine, we do not have those young people who finished the high school in the previous years and didn't have the right to realize the right to get access to the higher education. Another indicator which we analyzed with the help of our colleagues from the Quality of Education Center, we took the figures, or let's say the results of the those who finished the high schools in the previous years, and we are talking about statistics. We already 6 years elapsed since the date of introduction of this comprehensive, independent, external evaluation. 1 year of bachelor engineering education, of a bachelor degree and a master degree, 2 years. In introduction, this kind of independent evaluation as a tool to get access to higher education. So we have already the whole cycle of getting the higher education. I mean, if you're talking about time-wise speaking, and we do not have those who finished the high school and who did not realize their right to get the higher education. So there are only a few maybe. So in this case, the argument behind the new draft law is absolutely irrational, and in this form it cannot be adopted. Number 3. For several years in a row, we've been doing monitoring of those who would like to enter the higher schools according to our quality education program, which the idea behind that is that any kind of every freshman or first-year student has to pass the entering a test, whether he has the necessary language, let's say knowledge, whatever. Then he had to undergo a test on the profile subject, for example, mathematics in the mechanical mathematical department, or historical philosophical, history and philosophy, whatever else. So we can see the difference between different years. And the different results during the same year, according to the not between the years of perception of this or another curriculum or that or another information materials. So while working to increase the quality, to improve the quality, in order to improve the terms for entering to be admitted to the university, we understand that each year we are talking about absolutely different tests. And the argument number 4, 2 years in a row, we've been carrying out the pilot experiment based on our basis regarding the test for the general education level. To some extent, this is the test which provides the possibility to, or can give an opportunity to carry out the selection for those professions or vocations which do not have the previously determined demand. So we are talking when we do not have a kind of specific link to some specific subject or knowledge, but this is only the prospects which have to be worked on, as my colleague mentioned, but for several years from now, for quite a long time, so that based on this test we could determine the possible opportunities to study these specific vocations or professions where certain talent or giftedness is more valuable than the knowledge. But this is something which has to be concerned in the future, because 2001 year and 4000 for second year Yehorchenko test show that today, given all the positive of this test, this is far from providing the high quality selection for the higher education. So this point of opinion, we try to deliver this message of ours to the special committee, and some of the deputies heeded to our opinion, and the rest unfortunately did not. And especially today, when the admission campaign, the process for the higher education is in full-fledged, we should not introduce any kind of changes we are talking about now. Good afternoon, esteemed colleagues. I'm director of the Ukrainian Center for Evaluation of the Quality of Education, which takes care of the external independent evaluation. I would like to talk about 4 points, 4 positions. Number one, I really hate to call it this way, but this is true. The draft law which we are talking about forces the Ukrainian Center for Evaluation of the Quality of Education, or wishes to force our center to be involved in some kind of fraud.
Because to do that transformation of those results once one had in for results of 2014, that's
Fraud.
fraud. And Yehorchenko told you about that, and here's the letter of the National Academy of Pedagogical Sciences, and they say that it's impossible to do. So the draft law would like to force them to do fraud. I don't know. It will be very difficult to do, but it will be very difficult to explain to people and how to do that. As to those who graduated before, for them to use results of previous years, Liliya gave information about that. Every ninth among those who registered for external assessment, those graduated during previous years, who once passed that external test. We looked at the results that they received during previous years. Average, that's 136 points. So people who, because of different reasons, or one reason, they didn't have good results, so they weren't able to become students during previous years. Now we suggest them, we open them the door and we say, go to regional, provincial universities, and not because of placement, but because of quality. I call them provincial. Go, we are ready to accept you. But we forget that every ninth, or that is means 30,000, and they will push out those who graduated the school in 2015, who has fresh knowledge, who would like to be a student, and so they will be under equal conditions comparing to those guys we are talking about. These are not equal rights. This is a return to that practice which was initiated by Mr. Tabashnik in 2010. Now a group of deputies have decided to renew that practice. Point 3, so-called test for general test for competencies. It doesn't matter how the societies smile. In one of the law, it says that all the doctors, starting since 2015, and when they make surgery for appendicitis, they should use only one method, and there are two of them. And the draft law says, use only one method. All the world would laugh at us. So when the draft law says that to introduce a test for this test it makes me laugh, because the reform of higher education is based on a very important issue, autonomy of universities, and only a university has a right to decide what kind of test they would like to use during this entrance campaign. It isn't a subject or any other test. By this draft law, we would like to impose. That's why I consider this draft law as the first serious hit against the reform of the higher education and against its autonomy. And point 4. September 14, the law on higher education came in force. And that should initiate serious changes in education, including that law, first time describes assessment as a procedure, external assessment as a procedure. And if now we wanted to put amendments to that procedure, after 4 or 5 months, ruin the process of implementation of that law. That's a bad precedent for future reforms in education in Ukraine. Thank you. Good afternoon, Liliya Bezbashkina, and junior fellow in theoretical physics and also I'm teaching in Kyiv Academy. And I join all presenters, and I confirm that this dialogue doesn't provide equal access for students to study. I'd like to mention that we will not only just lose the trust to higher education, we will lose its quality, because we know that before we had Xenom, and you could enter good universities because there was a very good test, and kids worked a lot to enter them. Now Xeno, it's puts some kind of a bar for requirements. So kids who come and who study, that is a material you can work with. So they did a lot of work. They are not just motivated in words, they would like to study, and they proved with some work and with time they invested into that. So that's why I say someone who provides a higher education in an academic sense. We cannot compare different years. One gives a goal to oneself to enter a university and to continue studying. And also we take people who are not motivated. They don't become motivated during the process of learning. That's why we'll introduce then the state will provide a place to a student, but will not get a professional and will be in that vicious circle. That's why the reform of higher education that was initiated, and I hope that it will develop and we will see steps for the quality of our education and public spending and not professionals in the end. We want the quality to be high in the end. Thank you very much. Dear colleagues, do you have questions? I'm an assistant of an MP, Zbiorkowski, and a journalist in one of the publications. That's why I'm here. Tell me, please, in your publications, it says that a test for general competence is ready to be introduced. But last year, I don't know whether it's because of Sabochnik or some others, you kicked out the working group which could introduce that test this year, and that could help those young people who are in ATO and instead of going to universities, and they could use certificates from 2008, and now they have no chance. They have to study, learn for this program. What's their role? To study the school program or to enter the university where they, after the first session, you will see whether they can be students or not. And university who has 57 million, can't you develop a test and introduce it? And what time, how long do you need for that? I answer, you represent, as I understand, someone who was writing this law, this draft law. Directly, here's my answer. There is a saying, boots if somebody deals with something in which he's incompetent, we will have results like we have. The test for general competence, academic competence, I was one of initiators of its development, and also probation of test. It was developed, but we didn't finish. It is not ready to use it on a broad scale, because any professional who understands the theory of a pedagogical test will tell you that it should be a process. The process was not finished. As to this closing that working group, to disperse or not to disperse that working group, to do that, I need to have some confirmation. What did I use? A broom or what? Someone who was working on a test. Was dismissed from Ukrainian assessment for abusing working discipline. Do you need comments for that? Next question. Information portal Face News UA. Nina Khodorevska. I have two questions. The first one. Svitlana, you told that this draft law, that's a lobby of rectors. Could you explain how that works? Why do you believe in that? Because you told, you made a declaration, but it's not clear. The second question is, in the law that says such a formation, assessment of the level of general academic competence, it is done through logic, mathematical competence, and language competence. That's what is assessed, and how that can be for history students. Verbal or communicative or logical mathematical competence is needed, or the knowledge of history for school. Whom do you ask that question? Thank you. Thank you for your question. I will explain myself. We have entrance as a resource for higher education. So that number has influence. There are parameters, entry and exit parameters, the level of finance, and for budget seats, and also with the amount of profit as a result of selling education services to students. In such a way, rectors are directly interested in a bigger number of students in the universities. The problem with Ukraine now is that we are in a demographic pit. We expand that resource. Why do we need this? How to compensate that? We need to involve all possible resources of for previous years of different entrants of different age who passed the test and partially could influence on the growth of the number of students. The point is, this is the easiest way to enlarge the number. This is an extensive way. Developers of this draft law didn't think about other road of growing number. Internationalize higher education. At present, even under the system we have, we use the potential for 88%. So 12%, please come to Ukraine. Why? Why don't we invite? Why don't we do that? I explain, because those are investments. Because that means investments. Why should you invest into prospects into the future when you can pass a populistic law and try to get enrolled all those who are not in higher education? So these are the arguments. Thank you. Your question, you ask your questions that you look into the root, because this is the issue of application of this test. When
started to draft these tests for the general competence, actually we pursued the two goals. Goal number one, or objective number one, we said that subjective tests have to check the knowledge, but not the competence. The world, all the countries in Europe and the world, they form such a subject test so that they can actually verify or check the competence. And then there is no more need for this kind of comprehensive test, IZRK. But another objective of the test was to provide a test for those people who finished the high school a long time ago. So we based our approach on the Swedish model, which I mentioned before. Let's say for more than 4 years, finished the school, somebody, whatever. Those people who finished the high school before the year 2007, they did not have to pass that test. So we were talking, or we meant that specific category of people. And of course, that happened before this war or ATO operation in the East. So I've asked everybody not to try to get behind or try to cover the ordeals by those people who are fighting now in the ATO or coming back and would like to enter the higher school. So we introduced, or we submitted the draft law which have to make the government to draft the program for supporting the educational needs for the veterans of this kind of Eastern ATO operation. Many of them became disabled persons and they had to be retrained. So we are talking about absolutely different curricular, but not some test which is taken from the, the blue sky, whatever. And once again, this kind of immediate introduction of this test, which is not very well, let's say, verified or prepared, with the kind of the contingencies, different contingencies, how we are going to compare the results of this test with the results of other tests in other groups. This can only to provoke let's say, the new, the emergence of a new niche or gap to prepare another test. So we have to pilot to carry out the experiment with this test to understand whether we need that and who actually would need this kind of test. One more thing, if anybody believes that an independent external test is something different, you're absolutely erroneous. That it's easy to do. It would indeed to prepare such tests would be much more complex. When the people is just has the test to prepare a test on Ukrainian language, it's one thing. But if for the same period of time you will answer the questions from Ukrainian language, mathematics, history, and some other subjects, I don't think this will be much easier for this person. This is kind of the fraud or cheating, using which they try to camouflage or to disguise their own non-competence. Once speaking during the committee sitting, Yaroslav Belebash mentioned the position of the rectors that they did not support this draft law, but one regional council. To say that this is a rector's lobby, I would not use this term. We actually expressed our opinion that we do not support this draft law. Thank you very much, our listening guests. I'm sure we are going to see you much more in the future. And during this year, when they changed the state orders and they are going to use different principles which are underlying, some approaches, we are going to have perhaps more conflict situation like that. But